The blue and red lights flashed against the cabin walls, slicing through the stillness of the early morning. I stood on the porch, barefoot, coffee mug in hand, while two officers approached. Behind them, a woman in a beige pantsuit hovered like a vulture, arms crossed, chin high, voice sharp enough to cut glass. "That's him, officers. The trespasser. I told you he broke in last night," she barked. For a second I just stared at her, trying to wrap my sleepy mind around what was happening. Then the officer looked down at my ID, paused, and his whole tone changed. When he turned back to her and asked, "Ma'am, do you know who this man is?" I knew right then this was going to be good. It all started 3 days earlier. My mom had called to tell me my Uncle Robert passed away. It hit me harder than I expected. He was the quiet kind enough to leave me something precious, his old lake cabin in Pine Ridge Estates. The deed, the keys, everything legal and up to date. After months buried in paperwork and city disputes, I needed a break. So I packed a bag, got in my car, and headed to the mountains. The drive up was peaceful, pine trees, winding roads, that kind of quiet that makes your thoughts sound louder than usual. When I finally pulled into the gravel driveway, I felt something I hadn't in months: calm. The cabin was small, weathered, but still warm. The smell of old wood, the faint trace of smoke in the fireplace, it all brought back memories of being 16, fishing with Uncle Robert until sunset. That night I unpacked, made a fire, poured a glass of wine, and fell asleep to the sound of crickets and the lake rippling against the dock. It was supposed to be a night to breathe again, to remember family, not deal with conflict. But peace, I've learned, doesn't last long in neighborhoods run by people like her. At 7 the next morning, I was jolted awake by the kind of pounding you'd expect from a SWAT raid. I stumbled to the door, still half asleep, and opened it to find this woman glaring at me like I'd stolen her car. Clipboard in hand, lips pressed thin. "Who are you?" she demanded. "And what are you doing in this property?" "I'm Daniel Morrison," I said, rubbing my eyes. "This is my cabin. I inherited it from my Uncle Robert Morrison." She blinked once, then snapped, "Impossible. No one authorized occupancy here. This cabin's been vacant since Robert passed. Any new resident must be approved by the HOA, pay the transfer fees, and complete an orientation." I just stood there for a second, trying to decide if this was real life. "Ma'am, I'm not a new resident. I own this property. I have the deed, the keys, and frankly, I don't need approval to sleep in my own home." Her nostrils flared. "That's not how it works here, mister," she said, waving that clipboard like it was a badge of authority. "I've been president of the Pine Ridge HOA for 12 years, and I won't be disrespected by some outsider." I leaned against the doorframe and tried to stay calm. "Look, Linda, it's Mrs. Garrison," she snapped. "Right," I said. "Mrs. Garrison, I'm not trying to break any rules, but I'm not leaving. You're welcome to check with your board or your lawyer, but I'm staying the night." She jammed her foot in the door before I could close it. "If you're still here by tonight, I'll have you arrested for trespassing." Then she stormed off down the driveway, muttering something about community standards and background checks. I closed the door, sighed, and laughed under my breath. I'd met hundreds of HOA presidents in my line of work, arrogant, power-hungry, self-appointed gods of small ponds. But this one, she was textbook, Karen. The rest of the day was fine. I cleaned a bit, went kayaking, even met a few neighbors who turned out to be friendly. When I mentioned Linda, they all gave the same tired look. "Oh, you met Linda," one guy said, chuckling. "She once fined me because my deck stain was the wrong shade of brown. Had to show her the paint can to prove her wrong." By the time evening rolled around, I'd almost convinced myself the morning was just an overzealous misunderstanding. I grilled some burgers, sat out on the deck, and watched the sunset melt across the lake. Then I saw headlights. 2 sets creeping up the gravel path. Police cars. I stepped out onto the porch as 2 officers got out, flashlights in hand. Linda was right behind them, looking way too smug for someone who'd just called 911. "That's him," she declared. "The trespasser. This property's been empty for months." The officer walked up carefully. "Sir, we received a report of a possible burglary. Can I see some ID?" "Of course," I said, handing him my license and another card tucked behind it. He glanced at the first one, then froze on the second. His eyes flicked up to me, then back to her. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "do you know who this man is?" She crossed her arms. I don't care who he says he is. He's not authorized by the HOA. The officer cleared his throat. Ma'am, this is Daniel Morrison, Senior Compliance Officer for the State Real Estate Commission. Her face drained of color so fast I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. He turned to me, all professionalism now. Mr. Morrison, do you want to explain the situation? I nodded. I inherited this cabin from my uncle. Everything's legally filed with the county. Ms. Garrison here decided to accuse me of breaking in. The officer's jaw tightened. Ma'am, filing a false police report is a criminal offense. Linda sputtered. I was just enforcing HOA policy. Policy doesn't override state law, I said. And you just wasted law enforcement resources. For a moment no one spoke. Then I added, I'd like to file a complaint. This isn't the first time she's harassed me today. The officer wrote something in his notebook, handed me a card, and said they'd take my statement in the morning. Linda tried to plead, but it was too late. The look on her face, realizing she'd just tried to have a state investigator arrested, was almost cinematic. That night I sat by the fire, staring into the flames. I should have been angry, but what I felt was tired. I'd spent years cleaning up messes made by people like her, people who twisted community rules into personal power trips. For a moment I thought about letting it go. Maybe I'd just sell the cabin, move on, avoid the headache. But then I remembered my uncle, the way he used to say, don't ever let small minds run big things. And I realized if I walked away, she'd keep doing this to other people. So I didn't. When I got back to the city, I pulled Pine Ridge's HOA records. What I found was shocking even for me: years of missing financial reports, illegal board meetings, fines without due process. A whole system built on intimidation. And Linda sat at the center of it all like a spider in her web. I filed for a full audit and sent official notices to every board member. 3 weeks later, we called an emergency HOA meeting at the Pine Ridge Community Hall. By then, everyone knew. The 911 call had spread like wildfire. Dozens of residents packed the room. Some angry, some embarrassed, most just tired of her. Linda sat at the front table, gavel in hand, pretending everything was fine. But her hands shook. When the meeting started, I stood up not as a guest, but as the official assigned to oversee compliance. Good evening, I said, voice steady. As most of you know, I'm Daniel Morrison, the new owner of Cabin 12, but I'm also here in my capacity as Senior Compliance Officer for the State Real Estate Commission. A hush fell over the room. I laid out the findings: missing funds, illegal votes, harassment reports, the false police call. Each word hit like a hammer. When I finished, the room erupted. Residents who'd stayed silent for years finally spoke up. Tom, the guy with the deck stain, said, Linda fined me for putting up a bird feeder. Another woman added, she entered my backyard to measure my fence without notice. When the vote came, it wasn't even close. 11-1. Linda's reign as HOA president was over. She slammed her gavel. This is illegal. I built this community. You can't do this to me. Tom stood up, calm and firm. We're not doing anything to you, Linda. We're taking back what's ours. Security escorted her out as she shouted about bylaws and loyalty. Watching her clutch that clipboard like a shield, for the first time she looked small, powerless. In the weeks that followed, she was fined $5,000 and sentenced to 200 hours of community service for filing a false report. The HOA's insurer refused to cover her legal fees, and rumor had it she had to take a second mortgage just to pay her attorney. Pine Ridge restructured. Tom became the new president, fair, level-headed, everything Linda wasn't. As for me, the state asked me to help write new HOA oversight rules. They called them the Morrison Protocols. Ironically, Linda Garrison's arrogance ended up reforming homeowner law across the state. Now when I visit the cabin, I see her sometimes walking her tiny Pomeranian down the street, eyes on the ground. She doesn't wave, doesn't speak, just keeps walking. And I don't need her to. Because every time she passes my driveway, she remembers what she tried to do and who she tried to do it to. Funny thing about power, it's only real until someone calls your bluff. Lesson: never let fear or authority make you forget your rights.